I was working at a cafe in Berlin when an American tourist walked up to the counter and asked me, completely serious, if we had normal coffee. I looked at him for a second. He was staring at our menu that listed about 15 different types of coffee. Espresso, cappuccino, macchiato, flat white. He pointed at it and said, "Yeah, but like American coffee. Just coffee." I told him everything on the menu was coffee. He got frustrated and said, "No, normal coffee. Like from Dunkin'." That's when it clicked. This man was not asking about a drink. He was asking for a specific version of reality that only existed in his country. So I made him a cup of black filter coffee. He looked at it, took a sip, made a face and said, "This tastes like the rest of the world." That sentence has stuck with me ever since. If stories like this make you rethink what normal really means, you might want to stick around. That's exactly what this channel explores, because that's what this is really about. Americans don't just travel differently than the rest of the world. They actually perceive reality through a different lens. Not in a mean way, it's just that when you grow up in a country that big, with everything you could ever want, you start to assume the whole world works the same way. And when it doesn't, it creates these hilarious, awkward, and sometimes genuinely confusing moments. My friend Sarah worked at a hostel in Barcelona. An American guest asked her if they had a normal shower. She said yes, the bathroom is right there. He came back 10 minutes later looking confused. He said the water heater wasn't working right because the shower was cold. She asked him how long he waited. He said 30 seconds. He was used to American instant hot water. He didn't understand that most of the world requires you to wait a minute for the water to heat up. To him, this meant the hostel was broken. These aren't stories about stupid people. These are stories about how geography shapes your brain in ways you don't even realize. That's actually why I share these, not to mock, but to understand how culture rewires perception. If that idea fascinates you, you'll love what's coming next. I worked with a girl named Jessica, who moved to London for a year. On her second day, she went to a grocery store and spent 45 minutes looking for American peanut butter. The store had peanut butter. They had lots of peanut butter, but it was different. She told me it was like they were selling a different product. She ended up crying in the peanut butter aisle because nothing tasted right. That was actually the beginning of a bigger realization for her. She started noticing that everything was slightly off. The bread was different. The milk was different. The portions were smaller. The way people lined up was different. The shops closed at different times. Even the way people said hello in the morning was different. She wasn't in a different country. In her mind, she was on an alien planet. And the longer she stayed, the more she realized that her entire understanding of normal was just American normal. One more quick one. My cousin Tom went to Japan for 2 weeks. He stayed at an Airbnb, and the host left him instructions about the shower. 31 lines of instructions. How to turn it on, how to adjust the temperature, how to turn off the bidet, how to use the heated toilet seat. He called me confused and frustrated. He said, "Why is a shower this complicated?" That was his reality check. In America, you turn a knob and water comes out. Hot water. Every time, everywhere. But the rest of the world? The rest of the world has different assumptions. And when those assumptions crash into the American assumption, weird things happen. These stories are exactly that. Weird, funny, logical, but only from one side of the world. The first big category of American confusion abroad is pretty simple. America uses a different system for almost everything. And Americans know this. They know the rest of the world uses metric. But knowing something and actually understanding it are very different things. My roommate David went to Australia for a summer. First week there, he rented a car. The car had a speedometer in kilometers. He knew that. He was mentally prepared for kilometers. But then he was actually driving, and something happened. The speed limit sign said 110. He drove at 110. About 5 minutes later, a police officer pulled him over. The officer walked up and said, "You're going 110 kilometers per hour in an 85 kilometer per hour zone." David was confused. He said, "But the sign says 110. The officer looked at him, then looked at the sign, which said 85. The officer realized what happened. David had just glanced at it and assumed. His brain saw a big number, remembered that kilometers are smaller than miles, did zero math, and just drove. The officer let him off with a warning. But David told me that for the rest of the trip, every single time he read a speed limit, he had to manually do the math out loud. because his brain couldn't just accept that a smaller number meant slower. It didn't feel right. That's the thing about growing up with a different system. It doesn't just affect how you read numbers. It affects your gut feeling about what those numbers mean. My friend worked at a clothing store in Paris. An American customer came in looking for a medium. The store used European sizing, different numbers. The customer refused to try anything on. She said medium was medium. She pulled a size 40 off the rack, which was actually closer to a large in American sizing, and she put it on. It was tight. She came back out and told my friend the dress must be broken. It didn't fit right. My friend tried to explain that European sizes are different. The customer got angry. She said, "Size is size." She demanded to speak to the manager. The manager had to physically show her a size chart comparing American and European sizes. Even then, the customer didn't believe it. She thought it was a scam. She left without buying anything, convinced that European clothing companies had secretly changed how sizes work just to confuse Americans. Temperature is another one. I dated someone who worked in a hotel in Copenhagen. An American guest called the front desk complaining that the heat in his room wasn't working. The hotel sent someone up. The room was 22 degrees Celsius, which is actually quite warm. The American guest said it felt cold. Turns out he was used to American thermostat readings. In America, you set it to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 22 degrees Celsius. But his brain was trained to think that numbers should be on a different scale. So when he saw 22 on the thermostat, he felt cold. Because in his brain, 22 was supposed to feel cold. He was physically comfortable, but mentally the number was wrong. So he felt uncomfortable. This is such a weird psychological thing, but it happens all the time. My brother went to Canada for a weekend. Canada also uses Celsius. He checked the weather. It said 20 degrees. In his head, he thought it would be freezing. In reality, 20 degrees Celsius is about 68 Fahrenheit. It's mild, totally fine. But he brought a heavy winter coat because the number looked cold to him. He arrived, and everyone was wearing light jackets. He felt silly. Then there's dates. American date format is month, day, year. Most of the world uses day, month, year. My cousin was in the UK and had a dental appointment. The confirmation email said 03/07/2023. She looked at it and immediately thought it was July 3rd. She showed up on July 3rd. The dentist's office was confused. They explained her appointment was actually March 7th. They had already rescheduled her. She was a day too late, or 4 months too late, depending on how you count it. She actually called me furious, convinced the UK was using the wrong date format. Not that America was, that the UK was wrong. It took her 10 minutes to accept that different countries just use different systems. But my favorite measurement story is about a British girl who went to America. This is the flip side. She went to a restaurant and ordered what she thought was iced tea. In England, iced tea is a specific drink, usually from a can. Sweet, but not extremely sweet. The American restaurant brought her a pitcher, a huge pitcher of liquid that was basically brown sugar with a little bit of tea flavoring. She took a sip and her face changed. She asked the waiter if something was wrong with it. The waiter said, "No, that's just sweet tea. That's how Americans make it." She said, "This isn't tea. This is syrup with a tea-colored memory." She actually ordered it every day after that, just because she couldn't believe it was real. She told me, "Americans don't understand that everything doesn't need to be sweeter. Your entire food culture is trying to wake up your taste buds, not relax them." And that's actually the core issue with measurements and systems. It's not that Americans are wrong or right. It's that when you grow up with one system, you don't just intellectually know that other systems exist. Your entire nervous system is wired to expect certain numbers to feel a certain way. And when they don't, nothing feels right. The second major category is social etiquette. Americans have their own version of etiquette, and they genuinely don't realize that other countries have completely different rules. I worked with a girl named Emma, who had an American coworker in Stockholm. On his first day during lunch, he decided to call his mom in the office lunchroom, while everyone else was eating quietly. He talked for about 10 minutes, loud, about his medical problems, very specific medical problems. When he hung up, everyone had gone silent. They were all just looking at this guy. Emma told him later that people in Sweden don't typically make phone calls in shared spaces. And they definitely don't talk about personal medical issues where everyone can hear. He was genuinely shocked. He said, "It's just a phone call." Why would that be weird? He didn't get that he had created a situation where everybody in that room now knew about his digestive issues. Permanently. Another friend worked at a hotel in Amsterdam. An American family checked in and asked about quiet hours. The hotel said quiet hours were from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. The family seemed confused by the concept. They asked, "Do you mean like, we can't have fun?" The father then decided to test the boundaries. At 9:55 p.m., he and his family had their friends come over. They played music. They were celebrating something. It was loud. People came down complaining. The hotel knocked on the door. The family was shocked. The father said, "It's not even 10 yet." He was reading the rule so literally that he didn't understand the spirit of the rule. Quiet hours don't technically start until 10. But that doesn't mean you should start being as loud as possible at 9:55. This is a very American thing. Understanding rules very literally instead of understanding the intention behind rules. My friend Marcus worked at a hostel in Barcelona. One morning, an American guest came down to breakfast and started microwaving fish. In a communal kitchen, in a hostel, where other people were trying to eat breakfast. Marcus told him, "Maybe not fish in the communal area." The American said, "Why not? It's the kitchen." Marcus said, "Because everyone shares this space and fish smell is really strong." The American said, "Well, that's what I'm eating." He microwaved the fish. Then he sat at the communal breakfast table and ate it while everyone around him visibly suffered. That's not a story about a rude person. It's a story about someone who genuinely didn't understand that communal spaces require communal consideration. In America, you have your own kitchen. You can microwave fish whenever you want. But in a hostel, you're choosing to be loud in someone else's morning. Then there's the tipping thing, which is its own category of American confusion. My cousin Sarah worked as a server in a cafe in Berlin. The tipping culture in Germany is very different from America. You typically tip about 5 to 10%, and only if the service was exceptional. It's not expected. It's a bonus. An American customer sat at a table for 3 hours ordering multiple drinks. At the end, the bill was about 30 euros. He gave her 35 euros and told her to keep the change. She said thank you, but he looked disappointed. He said, "Just the 5 euros?" She said, "I'm sorry, the tip is 5 euros. He said, "I tipped you 17%. She said, "Yes, that's normal in Germany." He told her it was a terrible tip. She was insulted. She said, "In America you tip 20% minimum?" He said yes, and seemed to expect her to apologize for Germany's tipping culture. This is actually a really common thing. Americans tip because they feel obligated by their own system. Then they get offended when other countries don't have the same tipping anxiety, and sometimes they get angry at the server, like the server has done something wrong. In America, servers make less than minimum wage. The tipping system is how they get paid. But in most other countries, servers make actual salaries. Tipping is a bonus for excellent service. The American just doesn't understand that his guilt about not tipping enough is uniquely American. My friend went to Japan. There's actually a cultural rule in Japan where tipping is sometimes considered insulting, like you're paying them extra because they're poor. The American didn't know this. After a particularly great meal, he tried to leave a generous tip. The server literally chased him down the street to give the money back. The American was so confused that he called his hotel to complain about aggressive servers. There's also this weird thing about volume. Americans talk louder than most people in the world. Not intentionally. It's just how we're wired. Our country is big, our spaces are far apart, and we've evolved to project our voices. My friend worked in a library in England. An American researcher was doing work there. She wasn't being rude, she was just existing. But her normal speaking voice was louder than the normal whisper voice of everyone else in the library. She would talk to her friend in what she thought was a quiet voice. Everyone else could hear her clearly. Eventually, someone asked if she could be quieter. She was shocked. She said she was whispering. For her, she actually was. But her whisper was still a normal talking voice to everyone else. This happens on planes all the time. Americans will be talking to their seatmate in what they think is a private conversation. 30 rows can hear them, and they genuinely think they're being quiet. The shoes thing is also huge. In many Asian countries, you don't wear shoes indoors. This is a big cultural rule. My cousin went to a Korean friend's house. He was told to take his shoes off. He did, but he kept his socks on. Apparently, that's also not great in that house. You're supposed to go barefoot in certain areas. He didn't know this. He walked into the living room in his socks. The friend's mom visibly cringed. Later, my cousin was told that walking around in your socks is kind of like leaving your underwear on when you shower. It's almost worse than the original problem. He still doesn't really understand why, but he learned the rule. The last etiquette thing is queuing. Americans stand in lines. They understand lines, but in some countries, queuing has very specific rules. You stand a certain distance apart. You maintain eye contact. You don't cut. You don't even talk to the person in front of you. My friend was at a bus stop in India. She stood in what she thought was a line. An Indian woman tapped her shoulder and said, "You're standing wrong." She said, "What do you mean standing wrong?" "I'm standing still." The woman explained that she wasn't standing in the actual line. The line was more of a suggestion. People would gather in a certain area, and when the bus came, the actual order would reveal itself through a complex social negotiation that happens in the moment. My friend was horrified. She had stood in a line, and she wasn't even in the real line. She was just standing alone near a gathering of people. She said, "So there's no line?" The woman said, "Of course there's a line. You're just not in it." My friend never did figure out how the line actually worked. She just showed up early and hoped for the best. Americans have a particular relationship with world geography. We learn it, mostly, but we also sometimes learn it wrong. Or we learn it and then forget it. Or we learn it and don't understand what it actually means in real life. My friend Tom went to Ireland. He was at a pub and he told the bartender, "I'm Irish. My great-grandfather was from here." The bartender said, "Oh, where?" Tom said, "Dublin." The bartender said, "Okay, what part of Dublin?" Tom had no idea. He just knew his great-grandfather was from Dublin, which is a city of over 1 million people. He basically said, "I'm from New York," without understanding that New York is huge. He didn't have any actual connection to Ireland. He just had an ancestor from a place, but in his mind, that made him Irish. The bartender said, "Then you're American." Tom got offended. He said, "My blood is Irish," and the bartender said, "Your blood is American. You were just born from an Irish person 7 generations ago." But Tom could not accept this. To him, having Irish ancestry meant he was Irish. The bartender tried to explain that this isn't how it works. You don't get to claim a country that you've never lived in and don't actually know anything about, just because someone in your family tree was from there. I've seen this happen so many times. Americans claim to be French or Italian or whatever, based on a grandparent they never met. Meanwhile, the actual people from those countries are like, "You don't even speak the language. You've been there for 3 days. Why are you claiming our identity?" My sister worked at a museum in London. An American came in and asked if there was a section about the Revolutionary War. The museum worker was confused. "This is a British museum. They have sections about British history." The American got frustrated. He said, "The Revolutionary War is important." The museum worker explained that yes, in America it's important. But this is the British Museum. They have a section about, Britain. British history includes the loss of the American colonies, which is kind of a big deal. But it's not called the Revolutionary War here. It's called the loss of a colony. The American didn't like this perspective. My friend went to Europe and tried to impress people by saying he was basically European, because his DNA test said he was 15% Italian and 12% German. An Italian person told him, "You're not European. Europeans have actually been to Europe." It's funny because Americans have this tendency to think that ancestry equals identity. Everywhere else in the world, identity is based on where you actually live and grew up. There's also this weird thing where Americans sometimes don't realize how large Europe actually is. I worked with a girl who said she was going to do a Europe trip for 2 weeks. She wanted to see London, Paris, Rome, Berlin, Amsterdam, Barcelona, and Vienna. She thought she could hit up a few European cities. Europe is 3.9 million square miles. She was planning to see cities that are thousands of miles apart in 2 weeks, with time to actually experience them. When someone laid out the actual driving distances and times, she was shocked. She said, "Can't we just take high-speed trains?" She was imagining Europe like it was a theme park, like you could just hop from attraction to attraction. She didn't understand that Europe has fewer highways, more mountains, and is generally not set up for rapid car travel. She was thinking in American road trip terms. My friend Marcus went to Switzerland and asked if he could, quickly drive to the Alps from wherever he was staying. The Alps are literally everywhere in Switzerland. He wasn't that far away, but he was imagining like a 2-hour drive. It ended up being a more complex trip than he thought. He got frustrated that nature wasn't more convenient. Then there's historical confusion. My coworker went to Greece and was surprised that they didn't have very old original buildings from ancient Greece. She thought ancient Greek temples would just be sitting around in the middle of cities. She didn't understand that the ancient world is actually ancient. There's been a lot of time since then. Buildings fall apart. They get rebuilt. Things get destroyed. Civilizations change. She was expecting ancient Greece to be frozen in time from about 500 BC. When the guide explained that modern Athens wasn't built on top of ancient Athens, but rather rebuilt, she got angry. She said, "So this isn't the real Athens?" The guide said, "This is the real Athens, but it's been 2,500 years. Things change." My friend went to Mexico and asked a local, "Is this the same Mexico as the Aztecs?" The local said, "Well, geographically, yes, but culturally and politically, no. That was 600 years ago." My friend said, "But do Aztecs still live here?" The local explained that the Aztecs were from about 600 years ago. It's not like there's an Aztec neighborhood that's been preserved. There have been several centuries of history since then, but my friend couldn't grasp that time actually moves. She kept asking about Aztecs like they were a current group of people, not a historical civilization. I think the core issue is that Americans sometimes don't understand that the world is old. We're from a relatively young country. Our oldest buildings are like 400 years old. Meanwhile, there are European castles that are 1,000 years old. Cities in Asia that have been continuously inhabited for 3,000 years. It's hard to wrap your head around that kind of time depth when you come from a place where the oldest thing is like your great-grandfather's house. My brother went to Peru to see Machu Picchu. He was shocked that it was really hard to get to. You have to hike, and it's at high altitude, and it's not really designed for comfort. He expected it to be like a national park with paths and signs and gift shops. He asked a guide, "Why hasn't America bought this and made it nicer?" The guide said, "This isn't America. Also, it's been here for 500 years. It's not really designed for casual visitors." My brother said, "Well, I'm visiting casually, so the design is kind of messed up." He couldn't understand that ancient historical sites aren't designed around American comfort expectations. They're just old. That's the whole point. One more. I worked with a girl who went to Israel. She asked a local, "Is this where Jesus lived?" The local said, "Yes. This is the area where Jesus lived." She said, "So do people believe in Jesus here?" The local said, "Some, but most people here are Jewish. Jesus is kind of the reason the religions split." She was shocked that Christianity and Judaism were different things that happened in the same place. She genuinely thought they were the same religion and couldn't figure out why they had different names. It took her a while to understand that Jesus lived in a place that is now mostly non-Christian, and that this is completely normal and makes sense. Americans have very specific expectations about food. Big portions, easy access, lots of options, and we've somehow convinced ourselves that this is normal. My friend worked as a cook in Austria. An American family came in and ordered dinner. The portions were normal European portions. Reasonable. Enough food. Halfway through the meal, the father called the cook over and asked if the portions were the correct size or if they had made a mistake. The cook said no, this is normal. The father said it wasn't enough food. The cook said, "You can order more if you're still hungry." The father got upset. He said, "Why would I have to order more? Shouldn't a meal already be enough? In America, one meal is massive. You can eat half and take the rest home. Most people are full after. Here, one meal is sized for one person to finish. If you want more, you can get more. But the first portion is the portion." This blew his mind. He felt like he was being served incomplete meals. Then there's the whole thing about ice. American drinks come with tons of ice. Most of the world uses way less ice. My brother went to France and ordered a soda. It came with like 3 ice cubes. He asked for more ice. They brought him 1 more ice cube. He said, "No, like a bunch more ice." The waiter was confused. He said, "Why would you want lots of ice? That's mostly just water." My brother tried to explain that ice keeps it cold. The waiter said, "So you want mostly water?" My brother couldn't explain that this is just what Americans do. We like a lot of ice. The waiter couldn't understand why you'd want to dilute your drink. There's a whole thing about milk. Americans drink a lot of milk. Not just kids. Adults drink milk with dinner, after meals, as a snack. In most other countries, milk is for coffee or cereal. That's it. My cousin went to Germany. She asked for a glass of milk after dinner. The family she was staying with looked at her like she had asked for something weird. They said, "You want milk? For drinking?" She said yes. They gave her a small glass, like a shot glass, not a normal drinking glass. She said, "I meant a regular glass." They said, "This is a regular glass for milk." She wanted to tell them that in America, milk comes in huge glasses. But she realized that sounded insane. In Germany, the idea of a large glass of milk as an adult beverage was weird. Food combinations are also different. I went to the UK and they have beans on toast. Just beans on toast. Americans would think this needs something else. Cheese, meat, something. But beans on toast is an entire meal there. My friend there was confused. She said, "Is this it? Just beans?" The British person said, "Yes, just beans." My friend said, "Don't you need anything else?" The British person said, "Why would I need anything else? Beans are good." In America, we layer things. A sandwich isn't just bread and one ingredient. It's multiple things working together. But in other places, sometimes a simple thing is just simple. Then there's the whole thing about restaurants staying open. Americans are used to restaurants being open until midnight or later. In many countries, dinner ends at 10 p.m. That's it. You missed dinner. No food. My sister went to Spain and wanted to eat dinner late. This is actually normal in Spain. People eat late. But the restaurants she tried were all closed. She checked the hours. They served dinner from 8 to 11. It was 11:15. She went to try another restaurant. Same hours, 8 to 11. All closed. She ended up at a 24-hour McDonald's. She was so frustrated that she told her friends in America, "Spain doesn't have real food. It's just bars and McDonald's." She didn't understand that she was trying to eat at 11:15 p.m. in a country where 11 p.m. is considered late. Free refills. Oh my God, free refills. Americans are obsessed with this. In most of the world, you pay for drinks. One drink. That's it. My friend went to Italy and ordered a soda. The waiter brought him one glass. He finished it. He held up his glass and made a refill gesture. The waiter looked confused. He said, "You want another drink?" My friend said, "Yes. Can I get a refill?" The waiter said, "You have to order another drink." My friend said, "No, a refill." "Like a free refill?" The waiter said, "Why would it be free?" My friend couldn't explain that in America, once you buy a drink, you get unlimited refills. The waiter thought this was insane. He said, "That sounds expensive for the restaurant." My friend said, "Well, it's how it works in America." The waiter said, "That seems inefficient." The last food thing is about breakfast. American breakfast is massive. Eggs, bacon, pancakes, toast, hash browns. Like a 7-course meal first thing in the morning. My cousin went to France. She ordered breakfast at a cafe. She got a croissant and a coffee. That was it. She said, "Is there anything else? Like eggs or something?" The cafe worker said, "This is breakfast." My cousin said, "But there's no protein except the butter." The worker said, "It's delicious. You don't need more." My cousin was genuinely upset. She said, "How are you not hungry?" The worker said, "I'll eat more later." It's not dinner, it's breakfast. But in America, we treat breakfast like dinner. It's a full meal. So when my cousin saw a croissant, she thought it was an appetizer. So here's the thing about all of this. This isn't about Americans being wrong, or stupid, or culturally unaware. Most people on Earth would probably be equally confused if they traveled to America for the first time. It's just that America is big, wealthy, and self-contained. You can live a full life without ever leaving. You can drive for days and still be in the same country. Everything is available. Everything is open. Portions are huge. The customer is always right. Your comfort is a priority. When you grow up in that environment, your nervous system actually gets wired differently. You're not being difficult when you expect hot water immediately. You're not being rude when you talk loud. You're not being obnoxious when you expect a specific version of normal. You're just behaving like an American. And when you get outside of America, you realize that normal is relative. The rest of the world has different normals. Not better, not worse, just different. My friend went back to America after living abroad for a year. She went to a grocery store. The portion sizes shocked her. The amount of choice shocked her. The fact that everything was in English shocked her. Not in a good way, just shocked her. She said, "I forgot how much America has. Just everywhere, everything, all the time." She went to a restaurant and they asked how many refills she wanted. She didn't even understand the question at first. Then she remembered, in America, refills are a thing. You can just keep drinking. She ordered one drink. She drank it. She didn't ask for a refill. The server asked if she wanted more. She said no. The server looked confused, like why wouldn't you want a free refill? It was actually kind of sad. She realized that just being back in America made her act like an American again. Within a week, she was expecting big portions again. She was talking louder. She was assuming people spoke English. Her nervous system had reset. Because that's the thing. This isn't about individual choice. This is about systems and environments shaping who we are. America is a system that teaches you to expect certain things. When you leave that system, everything feels wrong. When you come back, everything feels right again. But here's the coolest part. The people who realize this, who understand that their normal is just American normal, not universal normal, they become better travelers. They become more understanding. They stop being confused and start being curious. They realize that a shower with complicated instructions isn't broken. It's just different. That a small portion isn't an incomplete meal. That quiet hours aren't a restriction. That other people aren't doing things wrong. They're just living in a different normal. My friend Sarah lived in London for 5 years. She came back to America and hated it. She said, "Everything is so much. The portions are too big. The people are too loud. The streets are too wide." She moved back to London. She said, "I know this is crazy, but America made me anxious. I didn't realize it until I left." She had gotten so used to a different system that the American system actually felt wrong to her now. If you're the kind of person who loves seeing the world through new eyes, even when it's uncomfortable, this channel is for you. So these stories, these weird funny moments when Americans are confused abroad, they're not really about Americans being silly. They're about what it means to grow up in a place. They're about how environment shapes reality. They're about the fact that there is no universal normal. There's just your normal, and everyone else's different normal. And if you're lucky enough to experience both, you start to understand that normal is flexible. Even if your shower instructions take 31